Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish, a podcast dedicated to transforming disabilities into special abilities. I'm your host, Brady Murray. Welcome to Conquering Your Clownfish. It is my pleasure to welcome our special guest today. Stephanie Hanrahan is coming to us from Texas. She is a writer, TEDx speaker, activist, and autism mom. After making her private journal public, Stephanie achieved viral success with her website and social media channel, Tinkles Her Pants. I love that name, by the way, for your channel, which chronicles her journey as a wife to a husband with chronic illness, mother to 2 children with autism, and a woman who often unravels, then finds her footing again. Stephanie has been featured on the Today Show, CNN, Yahoo News, and the Daily Mail. Stephanie is also a co-founder of Pip Productions, an online community offering educational resources for families of all abilities. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
This is going to be so fun to be able to visit with you today. I've had a blast preparing for this podcast because you have some amazing content and such an amazing story. Where I started was actually with your TED Talk. And let me say, that was very moving to listen to and very applicable, very, very applicable to me personally. And so I'd love to start there and share with us a little bit about that TED Talk and the idea of being more vulnerable and just being open about really where we are as an individual.
Sure. Yeah, the title kind of speaks for itself. I titled it The Problem with Being Perfect. And I think that has a multitude of meanings for me. But for so much of my life, I feel like I really wanted to be perfect and admired. And really what I was deep down searching for was to be known and loved, which are 2 very polar opposite things to strive for. But perfection was just ingrained in me. I'm that Enneagram 1. I'm a very controlled personality. And I'm also somebody that had carried a lot of shame in her life. So kind of from the beginning of my story until current day, there has been a lot of trial, overcome. And a lot of those things by societal standards are things that we don't talk about, things that we should shame away, keep quiet about, put on a pretty face, and just keep it moving. And that's what I did for the majority of my life. I really didn't talk about my abuse, my mental health, infertility, all of the things that were going on, including those for my loved ones. My husband has a very rare chronic heart disease. My children are both diagnosed with autism. So when you look at a picture of our family, more or less, it looks perfect. You don't see our invisible disabilities, so to speak. And eventually I just got really tired of pretending. It's exhausting and it keeps connection out. And so I decided that I would make my private journal public and I would tell the story that no one could see. And so that's really what Tinkles Her Pants and everything thereafter, including the TED Talk, is really about, which is telling stories no one can see and learning how to undo that ingrained perfectionism that I think is in so many of us.
No doubt. And so walk me through the journal. So as it relates to the journal, I believe you were keeping a journal on a private Instagram page. Is that correct?
Yes. It actually started Diagnosis Day with my daughter. And 3 at the time. I've always wanted to be a writer and always found writing very therapeutic for me. But this was not that. This was a pure attempt to get what was in my head and my heart down on paper so that it had some safe place to land. And so she was diagnosed. I put her down for a nap. I went home and just went into my bedroom, just cried while she was napping and started searching for a paper journal. Couldn't find one. And so I grabbed my phone and thought, okay, your phone is always with you. I've heard about this thing called Instagram. I didn't have an account. I didn't have friends, followers, didn't want them. Didn't even tell my husband about it, but I just wanted that safe place to land. And so that very day, I snapped a picture of her and I, a little selfie, and you can see the dark circles under my eyes from just crying. I mean, I was a mom filled with fear. I did not know a single other person on the spectrum at the time. And so I was handed this diagnosis and this daughter that I was looking at through a new set of eyes because I wanted to best support her. And I was so scared. And so that very day, I just started writing all my fears, all my grief, all my hopes in that private journal, on that private Instagram page. And so for 2 years, I kept that private to myself. I told no one. I was still publicly posting perfection on my, friends and family Facebook page. I wasn't a blogger. It wasn't anything like that. And so it got to the point where one day I had posted our family photos on my public page. And the photos that are just perfect and curated, or a photographer has edited them to death. And get the comments you always get, which is, oh my goodness, your family's so beautiful and you're so perfect. And that word perfection changed my entire life. I don't know who made that comment. I need to go back and look. But it felt icky because now what used to fuel me, the perfection, was just me realizing that I had practiced at being my truest self on these pages of this Instagram. And they were only getting my half truth, if that. And so quickly, I knew there had to be other special needs parents out there. There had to be people who had walked through abuse and anxiety and depression. And so made the journal public. And to my surprise, it was way more than one person who could resonate with it.
Well, there's a whole community. There's millions. In fact, I would submit everybody can resonate with this at some point in time, and definitely at multiple points of time throughout our life. The question that I have is, so that 2-year period that you were capturing this, and this was right after the diagnosis of your daughter, Campbell. And so what was the transformation that took place during that 2-year period of time? And I'm curious, how much of that was processing and understanding your new norm as it relates to raising a child that has autism?
I always say I wish there was like a lightning bolt moment that I could share, like, oh, that line in the sand, like here I was grief-stricken and fearful, and now here I am fully resolved. And that's just not the way it works, at least for me. It was a very slow unraveling of expectations, if that makes sense. Never grieving my child. I was grieving the idea I had in my head. And the perfect child only exists in our heads. The perfect
That's right.
wife only in our heads. And so I had to learn that my baby was still the same one that I birthed, the same one that I swaddled, the same one that I took home and had raised for 3 years. I was just learning something new about her. So really, it was never her that needed to change, or later on my son as well. It was me. I was the one being called to change. And that's what you see over those 2 years. It's very slow. And it's my journal. It's still the same Instagram I have right now. So if you scroll back, it's all unedited, very raw. It's very real. But it was important for me when I started Tinkles Their Pants to show people every part of me. And so I was not an advocate back then, if only just for my children, but certainly not for the autism community. And so I think that's important for a lot of moms and dads to see that it's real to process these emotions. And the more that you find a safe outlet to share those, it doesn't have to be a page or a stage. It could be a therapist. It could be a trusted friend. It could be other allies within the disability community, but you have to have a space to tell your story. That just happened to be mine. And I think it really healed me.
No doubt it did. There was a comment that you had made in preparation for our podcast that you had shared. I had asked, what's one thing that you want the world to know about your children? And you said that they are worthy without change. And what you just described, it really reminded me of that. And often, in fact, I would submit in every circumstance when a caretaker, a caregiver, a mother, a father is entrusted with a loved one with a disability, it has nothing to do with changing that child.
No.
That child came to us exactly how they were meant to come to us. It really comes into us and the transformation that we experience as a caretaker. For me, when Nash was born, we received diagnosis 10 minutes after he was born. He has Down syndrome, so that one was pretty straightforward. And I remember that was like 2 weeks later, I had my 10-year class reunion coming up. And I remember telling my classmates that I have a son who has Down syndrome, and we can probably all relate to this, that, the 10-year class reunion is when you're out of college and you're finally having a little success, and like people are starting to make a name for themselves and like talk about like Vanity Fair, if ever there was, at the 10-year class reunion, even in tiny little Preston, Idaho, where I grew up. And I remember going to that, and just feeling such humility and like almost like a rebirth or an awakening for me of what was really important as I shared with people that I have a newborn son that has Down syndrome. And I have to imagine that that was probably a similar process over the 2 years as you were writing in that journal, as you were processing that. And it just truly is like a new heart was given to you, a new lease on life and a view on what life looks like. And so, well done. Yeah, well done.
And thank you for sharing that. It's a very universal feeling. And I think what the world prioritizes and tells us is good and worthy may never align with our individual experience. And that's okay. And so I think that's part of the acceptance process, is knowing when I answered that question, saying they're good and they're worthy exactly the way they are. That is the gift of radical acceptance. So during the last almost 10 years of being a mom, almost a decade, that is where I have landed, which is not only offering radical acceptance to themselves, to them, but to myself. And that is the gift of grace, which is we can give what we've never received. And I don't know if I've ever fully received radical acceptance until I've looked through the lens of autism. So it's a beautiful.
That's exactly right. That's something that we find with our children, with this community, is they see us for who we are and that we are our best selves around them in their eyes. They see us as our very best selves. And oftentimes it allows us to rise up and become our best selves when we're around them, because that's who they see us as. They see us in that lens. And so what a beautiful gift that we have. It's fun because then there's the days when you're like, oh man, this is really hard. And it's fun to be able to have moments like this to reflect back and be able to really recognize truly what a gift and a blessing that we are to be able, or to have a beautiful child or children that look like this and have these special, special abilities. I want to share something with our listeners. This is a post that you did, in fact, just about a week or so ago. So April is Autism Awareness Month, and on April 2nd is Autism Awareness Day. And so each diagnosis has these special days, and they are a special day. But I thought what you wrote is very much worth sharing. By the way, you are a great writer. I noted that, and so it doesn't surprise me that that's something that you really enjoy doing. All right, so here's the post. It says, I don't want autism awareness. And what a great way to start this post on Autism Awareness Day. In fact, I don't want autism acceptance either. Here's why. Awareness, by definition, means knowledge of a situation or fact. You can have knowledge of autism and do absolutely nothing about it. Awareness doesn't equal action, and acceptance can be done begrudgingly. I accept that Monday rolls around after every weekend. I accept that there was rain on my wedding day. We can accept that things exist without ever having to embrace them, like people with disabilities. So today, on Autism Awareness Day, I'd like you to consider ditching awareness and acceptance and move towards inclusion instead, because that by definition means a sense of belonging. To bring in, to understand, and embrace. I'm raising 2 autistic children. I know them and accept them more than any other person on this planet. Yet, I still spend thousands of hours every single year learning how I can better support them. What if the world did the same? Don't just tell your kids to be kind. Order books on neurodiversity. Invite children like mine over to play, and then employ them. Real change shouldn't just be the responsibility of the disabled. It starts with radical inclusion by everyone else too. Beautifully said. Something I'm very passionate about, this concept of inclusion. I am going to adopt this additional word of radical inclusion. I like that additional meaning that you have shared there, but can you share with us a little bit about the inspiration and your feelings about this post and why you felt so strongly about posting that?
Yeah, to that because it's a lived experience. I'm very thankful that we live in the age of the internet for a few reasons, not all reasons, but a few reasons. And one of which is we are able to connect with different communities, and things like autism, Down syndrome, different disabilities get more attention. People are more aware that these kind of incredible individuals exist. So we've got the awareness. If I walk down the street, I haven't tested this out, but if I said autism, most people would say, I know what that is. And they may not
Yep.
full comprehensive view of what exactly the autistic experience is, but they've heard of it. So we have a little bit of awareness going on. Acceptance, as I mentioned in the post, can be done begrudgingly. Sure, put that kid in my class. That's fine. But there's a difference between the kid is in the classroom and the kid is invited to social activities outside of the classroom. The child is included at recess to play. Inclusion is a extra step that disabled children, adults, parents, caregivers don't have control over. And that's why I ended the post saying this is a team effort, that I cannot achieve the type of radical acceptance, inclusion, and awareness that my children deserve without everybody else that isn't part of the disability community doing their job too.
That's right.
That's really where inclusion comes into play with me. I'll be honest, it's my children's first year in public education. We have had a phenomenal experience, and that's really a testament to the incredible teachers that we have. But I was so scared of bullying. I was so scared of children misunderstanding mine and being outwardly mean. And that hasn't happened. And I consider that a huge win. But my daughter on multiple occasions comes home and just says, I'm so ignored. She uses the word ignored. And I understand that feeling. And and observationally, I've seen that happen at playgrounds and social events and settings. And so that's where inclusion comes into play, because it's one thing to teach your kids, be kind, don't say anything offensive to someone with a disability. Okay, great. But where's the next step? How do we include them? And then guess what? Little people grow into big people. So now we're looking at corporations, companies. Are you going to employ adults with autism? So this is a systemic issue, and we could probably spend a full hour diving into that. But that's kind of the gist of the post, which is we have to look at this through a new lens. It's great to wear the color blue, or now red, which is the Autistic Identity Movement's preferred color. But it's a whole nother thing to embody it, to say, how do I teach my children and my family to be inclusive? And then there's a whole nother layer when the disability is invisible, because my children can, for lack of a better word, present as typical until they're not. And then
That's right.
labels. They're given labels like weird or quirky or odd. And so I really need everybody else, that's my greatest prayer, to come on board and be a team with us in that inclusion process.
Definitely. It's especially difficult, like you had mentioned, with the invisible disability that exists there. And so that makes it much more difficult. And so oftentimes individuals have an expectation as to what somebody should be like or act like. And when that expectation is not met, that's often when they will withdraw. And so exactly what you say, they accept, they're not against by any means, but it doesn't mean that they're going to really seek for inclusion. What happens, however, when individuals are willing to go past that mental barrier that they have and become friends and include and experience that special ability that these children have, and adults for that matter, is one, the child with the unique ability benefits, no doubt. Your daughter will feel and say she feels included, not ignored. But without exception, and I feel so strongly about this, the person that will benefit the most from inclusion is not the individual with the disability. It's the individual that gets to associate with the person who has a disability.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are going to experience change of heart. They're going to experience love, unconditional love, joy. They're going to experience everything that we on the inside, if you may, know. And that is my belief on one of the ways in which we will empower and be able to change this world. is to get that special light and that special gift that comes from this amazing community into the world. And honestly, that is the motivation behind why I created this podcast in Conquering Your Clownfish, is encouraging parents and caretakers to take a deep breath, put on your badge of courage, and allow your child to go and experience the world and let that light shine that's out there. And it's super scary. I've been living with it for 16 years, but congratulations on taking that big jump, Mom, and letting the public schools experience that special gift that exists within your child. And hopefully they meet halfway and are able to do that more inclusively. So awesome job on that.
Thank you. It's been interesting to watch them. There's an old adage that says the tools that our kids need to succeed in this world are out in the world. So I so much within the four walls of my home, and I've instilled them with a lot of support, and now they have to go practice what they've been taught. And one of the coolest things is, and my daughter's 2 years older than my son, is to watch her self-advocate. She has become this fierce little self-advocate, and she has told her classmates, I am autistic. This is who I am. And it's been a learning process because their idea of autism differs from how Campbell presents. That's actually the inspiration behind, I just launched a inclusive activity. It's called the True Hues Color Wheel. And it's a visual representation of the spectrum. And that came because Campbell came home and said, Mom, my teacher read a book on autism today. And after she was done, I raised my hand and I said, oh, guys, guess what? I'm autistic too. And every single one of her peers looked at her and said, no, you're not. You don't look like the little boy in the book. The little boy in the book was nonverbal and it was stimming and had more stereotypical presentations of autism that you see in media and in written literature. And Campbell doesn't present like that, but she is very much autistic. So we create what we can't find as parents. Your testament to starting a podcast, the same with my blog, and now with the True Hues Color Wheel, is to teach people that we are all made up of a multitude of colors and one diagnosis. It's hard for even adults to understand that that name autism is one name for a million stories. So
that's right.
Proud of her for telling hers.
I did see the color wheel, and I think that's a brilliant idea. What a wonderful visual depiction for the self-ad to be able to share what they are feeling, but also for others to be able to understand that this is not the same. This is all very different. And the reality is that could be said for any diagnosis. I think autism definitely has the most broad spectrum, but it is the exact same thing. I have 2 boys with Down syndrome, and they're very different. Peas and carrots, they love each other, but they are very, very different in that respect. I want to share this. I had a very strong impression and feeling as you were sharing about your daughter, Campbell. And it reminds me of the post that is on your Instagram. I think is probably your most viral post that has existed, where Campbell talks about and becomes emotional when Eli, I don't remember the exact circumstance, but when Eli, I think, had a turkey sandwich, if I'm not mistaken. Can you share about that moment? And then I'll share with you what this impression is that came to my mind.
Yes. The ways that autism presents for both of my children is they have really strong sensory aversions to food, which means it's very challenging to get them to try new foods, mixed textures. They have a very rigid diet. And it's been a huge point of contention and fear for me because I just want my kids to be healthy physically as well. And so Campbell's really come around with the eating, Eli not so much. And so there was a day last summer, I believe, that he decided to pick up her turkey sandwich. And I mean, he took the smallest, most minuscule bite of that turkey sandwich. And we just lost it. We're crying, we're clapping, we're cheering for this incredible 7-year-old boy who just did a really brave thing. And Campbell had the biggest reaction of all. So I just happened to have my phone and picked it up. And she just said, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this. And so it was a really beautiful moment for our family. And I'm so glad that it resonated with so many people. It went viral. And there was a lot of people inside the autism community and outside of it that got exposed to autism through this tiny little moment at our kitchen table. But I think, and I'd love to hear your input, but I think the reason it resonated is that There is a miracle in every single day if we look for it. This is how, at least this moment resonated for me, is to know that we may never meet the milestones or the accomplishments that the world deems worthy, but these are the things that are so pure and deserve to be celebrated too, and deserve to be seen and acknowledged. And through the lens that I've been given with raising these two kids, I get to see that.
That's right. And this is the thought that I had come to mind. Campbell, you're very correct. Most people, as you visit with Campbell, is probably not going to immediately come out and say, oh, this girl has autism. And they don't recognize that necessarily. But she has such a strong self-awareness about that. And she is a tremendous self-advocate. And it only seems fitting that she has a little brother as well that she gets to advocate for and be a defender to. And you can see that emotion in her face and in her voice as Eli had that little bit of a turkey sandwich and loved it and was so excited about it, because it was a way for her to connect with her brother, but also a way for her to advocate for him, because she just wants that. She is his biggest champion to be able to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. And so it just makes sense that you have such a wonderful following and have such a great platform to share these kids' stories. I would put that you are a catalyst for truly a bigger picture on what Campbell is going to be able to accomplish in her life. And so you're laying a beautiful foundation for her to truly sing that song she's meant to sing, much past our days and much bigger than anything that obviously your husband are going to do. And so she's awesome. She is amazing.
Thank you. I can't believe she came for me, but I will say that she teaches me every single day, and I'm proud to pass the torch to her. And I think just to encourage any parent out there who is feeling weary about sharing their diagnosis with their child, because I get a lot of messages from parents that say, if I tell them, then what? And I'm scared, and I'm scared that other people will view them differently. I'm scared they'll feel that they're different. And my message is always the same, which is they already know they're different without you even giving them the words, but they need that self-affirmation. They need to know that they are that their differences are not deficits, that the way that they are wired is not wrong. And if you lead with that confidence and assurance that this is a positive thing, it's hard too. And please acknowledge that for them. It is hard and beautiful at the same time, because two things can coexist and be true at once. But when you give them permission to accept themselves because you have accepted them first, it will change their entire life. It's that radical acceptance.
That is wonderful advice. And that is so correct. And the sooner that I believe a parent can be able to not even just tell their child, but embrace it. They were born exactly how they were supposed to be born. Back to the comment that you had made, that they are worthy without change, that child is worthy without change. I think the better off that child's experience is going to be, as well, as early and often as possible. I'll share a personal experience that I think is a different example, but is very much resonates here. With my family, we love adoption. So Andrea and I have 11 kids, 7 of which are adopted, which honestly is even weird here in Utah. And so I don't know how we got to 11 kids still to this day, but I actually was adopted. And so I was born Brady Gomez. And then I was later adopted Brady Murray by my father, my stepfather, actually when I was 13. And all throughout my childhood, all throughout, even until I was an adult, we never talked about it. We didn't want to talk about it. It was something that was hidden, that we wanted to kind of keep under wraps, and that it wasn't a good thing that Brady was or is not a biological son, so to speak. And it was really hard because I have dark hair and a darker complexion, and my dad is as blonde as they get, and all my sisters are as blonde as they get. My mom is blonde, and I'm just like the odd man out. And we would get the funniest questions, and I wish so bad we would have embraced that all along, because that experience in being able for me to have 2 amazing fathers that have given so much to me, has made me who I am. And it took me a lot of years to be able to recognize that and to embrace that and let that be part of my story that is empowering. I think it's a very similar thing for our children and our loved ones that have unique abilities. They're born differently in that respect. We're all born differently, but those the world would deem as disabled or having a special need, that is a superpower. And the quicker that we can see that and grasp that, it's going to help them and then ultimately allow them to go on and sing that song they're meant to sing. So beautifully said. Yeah, thank you.
The conversation or the shame away, because a lot of what I've learned has been from adults with autism that will share their story.
Yeah.
And learning that the word disability, disabled, is not bad. Learning that
Yeah.
autism is not bad. Just giving them the language to normalize that for other people, and
Yes.
gives them permission to just feel less alone in their walk. And that's what we all, at least I speak for myself at the end of the day. I just want to know I'm not alone. I just want to know that I am of value and worthy as I am. So give that gift to our child early on. I think it's the best thing we can do.
That's right. And that really takes us back right to the beginning of the conversation where you talk about your transformation that transpired, where it really is about just feeling loved, not being alone. And that's a beautiful thing. So in closing, I'd like to ask one more question. And this is a question that would resonate especially well for those families that are brand new to the autism world. In fact, my guess is there's probably some families that are pretty sure they have a diagnosis or a diagnosis will be coming, but it's maybe not official and they're afraid of what maybe that diagnosis will be. And then there's those families that have just received that diagnosis and are in that year or 2-year period similar to what you were as you were processing this. What advice and what counsel would you share with them?
So much. But I think the first thing that comes to mind is that this is a diagnosis that you can and will live with. How lucky are we? Because there are a lot of diagnoses out there. I speak as a former nurse that we don't get to live our lives with, that optimize our life and take our life. And this is not one of those. And I want them to listen to me closely. This will not take your life. It will enhance your life. It will change your life if you let it. And I also think it's important to really validate where those people with a newer diagnosis are at and say, it does feel hard and it does feel sometimes unfair. It's never easy to hand over tens of thousands of dollars and tens of thousands of hours to therapists and to have your life change and your home change and your marriage change. But if that circumstance is unchanging, your perspective still can. And there is so much beauty here. You will see it and you will find it if you look for it. And you may even find it in a turkey sandwich. So just hang tight and know that this diagnosis you will survive and you will thrive.
Thank you. So well said, Stephanie. Thank you for being a guest on the show today. We've put all of your contact information in regards to website, Instagram, social media channels, and the beautiful work that you are doing right now in your companies, all in the show notes. We encourage our listeners to reach out and to be able to engage with this amazing work that Stephanie's doing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conquering Your Clownfish. If you liked what we discussed on the podcast today and want to continue the conversation, please visit us at conqueringyourclownfish.com. And please don't forget to subscribe.